Okay, without further ado, I think we can start or continue, depending on if you've already been here or just arrived. So for those of you who just arrived, okay, let me introduce myself again. So I'm Aliz Horvath. I'm assistant professor of East Asian history and digital humanities at CEU since last September. And well, not surprisingly, I teach East Asia and digital humanities related courses here. And I'm the co-program director of the Advanced Certificate in Digital Humanities. So, well, according to the schedule, I'm going to start with the complete courses that I'm teaching, which are also part of the Advanced Certificate. And then we're going to talk about the Advanced Certificate itself in a broader and more holistic sense. So you get a sense of that. Now, the one thing I would already say about the Advanced Certificate, so this was introduced last year when I arrived at CEU. So we are running it together with the Network and Data Science Department, which already kind of shows, you know, the nature of this field. And yeah, whoops. Okay, now this year I'm teaching two courses related to digital humanities. One of them, this is the fall course that starts next week. So basically, Introduction to Digital Humanities, the life cycle of a DH project. So this is a class that's the only mandatory class in the Advanced Certificate, which means that this is offered every year. But this is the only class that's definitely offered every year. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more when I talk about the Advanced Certificate. Now, this one is, I taught this last year too. This is what it means. This was actually a quite popular class, I would say, even though this was Monday 8:50 class. So I like to teach on Monday mornings, I would say. But I'm one of the very few people here who likes to teach on Monday mornings, which means that there are not a lot of other classes. So there's less likely to have any kind of conflict between different courses. So that's, I think, part of the reason why so many students still took this class despite the early morning start, because, well, they didn't have to worry about any kind of other class that they wanted to take, but they couldn't because there was some conflict. So now, one thing I would say about this class, well, I think the title already says quite a lot about it, but I would rather talk about how I approach this, because different institutions teach digital humanities different ways. So some universities offer a complete ME programs or minors. We offer an advanced certificate. So, and I think this is actually a quite good structure for now, I would say. And there's no one right way of teaching digital humanities. There are, obviously, everyone has their own approach to it. The way I like to teach this, and I think that's one of the biggest advantages, and I think what makes this class important and why we made this one mandatory, is because so this class essentially aims to offer you an overview of what digital humanities actually is or are, even though there is no consensus about what this is. So 10 people will give you 11 different definitions of what this may be and what actually belongs to this. So because the definitions are malleable, it's kind of difficult to also really figure out and describe what really belongs here. But there are still some sort of like traditional fields or subfields. It's also difficult to say like a field, because some people think this is a field, some people call this a discipline, and other people just call it a thing. Yeah, so I think this already shows you quite a lot about how difficult it is to actually somehow navigate digital humanities. But at the same time, I think it's useful for you to know about, at least to have a sort of foundational understanding of what this means, even if you end up not completing the advanced certificate or not using this after your studies. I think in 2025, it's very important for you to at least have a basic familiarity of what kind of digital tools are already available for you. Now, like I said, people teach intro classes in different ways, but I would say the way I like to approach this is by, again, like going through the life cycle of a DH project. So we go from, so how you would actually approach a DH project. So from conceptualizing it, from digitizing materials to actually make them available in a machine readable format. And then what do you do with that? So like text analysis, data visualization, and then some sort of like a critical analysis. So critical analysis is one of the key things here, not surprisingly. And at the same time, since this is a one-term class, there's so much we can do. So we might not be able to delve really deeply into all of these different areas, but at the same time, I think this already gives you quite a good sense of what are some of these key subfields or sub areas that are out there. Because based on my experience, a lot of people either don't have that much prior knowledge about digital humanities, and that's completely fine. That's why you would take this class. So I don't expect you to have any kind of prior knowledge. You don't need to know how to code. In fact, in this class, we're not even going to code anything, because I want you to first understand what this is about and why you would even move on to code anything, or whether you even need to do that. Because believe me, there are a lot of people in digital humanities who don't code at all, because it's not always necessary. There are plenty of tools that you can already use that don't require coding, but already give you a sense of success that, yes, I can accomplish something. And at the same time, I think if we delve into coding without any kind of contextualization or why you would do that, what this actually means to do digital humanities, I think it can get really easy to get lost in the details, because you might not be, you can definitely not become a computer scientist in one term, and it's not even the goal. You don't need to. That's not how humanists usually contribute to digital humanities projects, which are most of the times, by the way, collaborative projects with humanists, research software engineers, and like a very peculiar setup. So oftentimes humanists are not even necessarily required to code, but at the same time, it obviously helps if you at least understand how computers think. So in this sense, we're going to talk about that too. But this class is probably the one that's one of the most theoretical. At the same time, we're also going to try out certain tools that are relevant to a certain topic. But at the same time, we're going to take a very critical approach. So we're going to discuss things like, for example, in the case of data visualizations, we're going to discuss things like what makes a data visualization good or what makes it less successful. And that's going to be like a sort of assessment where we're going to collectively discuss that. So I think it usually helps if you kind of have a sense of what you want to accomplish, why you would do that, and what is it that you want to see, and then find the tool that can help you accomplish that. I think that's the most productive way of thinking about digital humanities in general, because then that helps you really keep your focus on the research question or the things that actually interest you. And that's, again, something that I noticed, not just among students, but in general, that even if some people have some sort of understanding of digital humanities, or sometimes they hear people tell them that, oh, you should try spatial analysis, or you should try this, and they might hear about that one thing. And if they like it, that's fine. But if they feel like that's not really for them, then they just abandon DH altogether, because they feel like, that's not my thing. But at the same time, if they hear about something else, that, oh, by the way, I can do this, I can do that too, they may realize that there's a plethora of things that they're actually interesting to them and much more doable to them. And that actually is something that may fascinate them even more. So this is why I think it's quite useful to go through the different fields that are out there, so you can decide what might be relevant and interesting to you individually. And then you can take perhaps more advanced classes on, and you will see when we talk about the advanced certificate, the elective classes are usually more focused on one area. So then those are topics that you can take depending on what might be interesting or relevant to you. So this is why we think that this kind of foundational class is the starting point, and then you can move on to some other more specialized niche advanced classes as well. And obviously you can also do that on your own. There are also a lot of DH workshops. Vienna is really a golden mine of digital humanities. It's very well developed in Austria. So, and CEU is also now becoming more, well, I'm doing quite a lot of work to make CEU a part of this DH network and universe in Austria. So we're better connected to it. And this also means that there are more and more opportunities for graduate students to, for example, in terms of funding, to go to DH conferences, to present there, to get, for example, paid to get licenses for software that you might need. So there are these kinds of digital humanities consortium and organizations that can help you with that too. So, and we're going to talk about that too, actually, in the case of the intro class too. So you get a sense of the realities of doing this. So also the possibilities of doing DH, but also the some limitations and also things that might be, I think, require some sort of critical thinking. And I think that's where humanists can be particularly strong. And that's something I noticed last year too, when I was co-teaching a class with a professor in network and data science. And half of the class came from history, the other half from network and data science, and then was one student from gender studies. And I noticed this kind of sheer difference in how the network and data science students who oftentimes had a computer science background and maybe never had a humanistic class before, how they approach the topics that we talked about, as opposed to history students, and that was actually very interesting to see. But that's actually what we want to reach, to have students from these different backgrounds in the same room, so they can learn from each other and see how the other person thinks, because so you can also bring a lot of things to the table, and that's where I think humanists sometimes are a little bit too timid. And in the case of DH, they might sometimes think that, oh my God, if I cannot code, then I'm nobody in DH. But we are actually way beyond that kind of phase, when some people in digital humanities thought that you need to be able to code your own software to be able to declare yourself as a digital humanist. We are not there anymore. So we're much more inclusive, and at the same time, I think humanists have this kind of very valuable way of thinking about not just digital humanities, but about technology in many ways, which is very much needed today, and it still is somehow underrepresented. And a lot of times, I think those with a computer science background, they tend to feel like the way they measure success is that they can successfully create some sort of code that works well, and then they're happy. But they don't necessarily think about the implications, the critical role of what they actually create, what kind of intended or unintended consequences that might have, how this actually makes sense. Is it worth even doing a specific kind of project, or what's the value of using DH in a specific context? Do we actually need that? Or how does this add to our understanding? What kind of novelties this can present, and things like that. And that's something that humanists are particularly strong at, and they are the ones who can provide these kinds of insights. So I'm glad that many of you came to this orientation, because that shows that many of you are interested in this. And I'm telling you in advance that you have a lot to contribute to digital humanities, with or without coding. So, and I think, I very much hope that the computer scientists and research software engineers will also see that at some point. Okay, do you have any questions about this? Yes?
I have some paleography issues with the text that I want to work on. Is this class going to be particularly helpful for me, or perhaps not?
Well, you can come next week to week one. We're going to go through the syllabus in detail and what we're going to actually talk about, because now we don't have a lot of time to discuss that, and how you can complete the class, and what kind of assignments will be, what kind of topics and materials we will go through, and then you can decide if that's for you. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, one more thing I wanted to say. Yeah, linguistically inclusive. So that's another thing. So since I do East Asia studies, I work with non-Latin scripts on a daily basis. And if you want to do digital humanities with non-Anglophone materials, this can be quite tricky. That's the reality. And I think digital humanities has a lot of potential, but it can be also very uneven and unevenly challenging depending on the languages that you use. So I'm involved in some advocacy groups as well that try to make the digital humanities field more linguistically inclusive and more aware of these sheer differences that some people in the field are not even aware of or don't want to acknowledge. This kind of difference, that what's possible for English language sources may not be possible for Gashuni Malayalam, for example. And yeah, just as an example. So that's something that I intentionally include into the curriculum. So we talk about these issues, especially because CEU is such a multilingual university. So this is, again, like the center of multilingualism. So this is something that many students last year, for example, who took this class, were actually in this situation, that they work with non-Latin scripts, they work with non-Anglophone materials. And I think it's better if you know about this early on, that certain things may not work as easily or smoothly in DH as it may for English text, but that doesn't mean to discourage you or anything. It's just that I think it's better if you're aware of these potential additional challenges that may arise. But at the same time, it can be even more valuable if you manage to solve some of the issues that may arise. Yeah. Okay, and this is, by the way, something that doesn't often come up in digital humanities teaching. So, and in Austria, for example, most other universities are very German centric, and Germany is actually quite well resourced in digital humanities. So again, they might not necessarily tackle this issue of multilingualism so intentionally because they might not feel the need to, but we will do that. So, okay, if there's no other question about this, then let's quickly move on to the other class that I'm teaching this year. Yeah, and this is a brand new course that I'm very excited about. This is in winter. From text to pixel, digitization, digital editions, on-site practice. So again, this now both of these classes are for graduate students only. So these are not open to BA students. I'm mentioning this because the Stygian classes are open to fourth year BA students. These are not. So these are only for MA and PhD students. And as you can see, this is also part of the advanced certificate of course as a mandatory elective class. Now, like I said, this is brand new. So we'll see how this works out, but I already mentioned this at the top of the slide that this is going to be a collaborative class with the Austrian National Library, who partially actually volunteered to do this. So originally I wanted to focus on digitization per se, which is essentially the starting point for most DH projects. And that's where actually many DH projects already fail, or they cannot even be launched because the text cannot be digitized or made machine readable. I mean, and at the same time, what I wanted students, and that's is still part of this class, to know is how this process actually works, and through the example of the GLAM sector. And that's why this is going to be a quite rich class in terms of what we are going to do, because with the contribution of the National Library, I ended up actually expanding the scope of this class. So it's going to be not just about digitization, but about digital editions too. So what do you actually do with these digitized materials? And there's going to be on-site practice. Now, what does all this mean? So what this means actually is that we're going to start, well, in a chronological order. We're going to think about the concept of digitization, what this actually means in a critical manner. You're going to get some readings. We're going to have discussion forums. So that's important to kind of contextualize this in a critical manner. But we're going to also have visits to the National Library's digitization unit. So you can actually see how one of the premier libraries in Austria actually make these their holdings available that you can see on their website. And believe me, those scanners are not like the copy machines in the hallway. And that's the reason why I want you to see that, because I think this can be very useful for you, since I think many of you might be interested in working in the GLAM sector after you graduate. So in libraries, archives, museums, and most of these institutions use these kinds of machines. So I think this might be quite useful for you to familiarize yourself with these different types of scanners. So I personally also have a supplementary certificate in digitization. So I learned how to use these scanners, and I actually enjoyed it immensely. It's so much fun if you get a sense of it. So, but these are these very expensive high-end things. So it's actually a privilege that they are going to allow us to go there. And one thing I would say is that I will have to ask the administrators to put a cap on the registration. So now it's still 30, but it's going to be capped on 20, because I spoke with the people there, and they just cannot have more people in the room at the same time. So there are some capacity limitations there. So that's why just letting you know that it's going to be capped at 20, and we'll not be able to increase that eventually. So yes, at the same time, so like I said, we're going to start with digitization, but afterwards, we're going to also have a special roundtable that I'm organizing. It's going to be on Zoom, and maybe it's going to be at a special time slot and not when the class will likely be scheduled for. It's likely going to be a Monday morning, but not 8:50 like the intro class, but it's likely in the second time slot, so 10:50, because I want you to have some time to get back to CEU for your other classes during the lunch break. So that's why I want to schedule it for that. But we're going to have a special roundtable on Zoom with 3 panelists, hopefully. One from the German Historical Institute in Washington, and that's why it might be in a different time slot, because she's in DC, so she might not make it in the morning time slot here. And 2 people who are based in Germany, in Bielefeld and in Hamburg, who are working with different tools that comes after digitization. So multispectral imaging with infrared rays, for example, computer vision, and using all this for text analysis and not just for art historical reasons. I think this is a quite new field, but I think it can be equally useful for you to see. So what happens afterwards? So what do we do with these materials? And I think that's also quite a state of the art that you might want to be interested in. I think in 2025, like what else you can do with these things. So I think as like concrete case studies, this can be useful for you too. And also to think about the role of digital tools and AI, not just in culture, heritage preservation and recovery, which is some of these traditional fields why GLAM institutions use these methods, but also for creation, which is actually a quite tricky thing, like creating things in historical context through AI. So we're gonna discuss that too. And then we're going to move on to the other phase of digitization, so making a text machine readable. So we're going to use Transcribe as one of these key OCR, HDR, optical character recognition, and written text recognition software. That's actually Austria-based, and one of the staff members of Transcribe from Innsbruck is going to also do a presentation about it. And he actually said that he likes to work with students too, so he was actually very happy when I invited him. And then comes the other part of the ÖMB, so the Austrian National Library's contribution, because the ÖMB labs, when they heard about this class, they were the ones who approached me that they want to be a part of this, that we could make more out of it together. So we're gonna do the digital edition part 2. So 3 of them in different combinations will come to teach you to make digital editions. Which is also actually quite useful, I think. So that's also a key task that many GLAM institutions are doing. So basically to make existing texts that are already out of copyright, machine readable, and transcribe and annotate them, contextualize them, and make them available to people in an open access format. So this is something that's becoming more and more popular. There's already an existing scholarship on this. And in Austria too, this is particularly popular. And the director of the UMB Labs and 2 of his colleagues will come to help you learn how to do that. And that's going to be actually your final project where you're going to make mini editions that we will hopefully make available. So we just have to figure out in what platform. So yes, okay. Like I said here, just like in the case of the intro class, no programming skills are required. So that's something that can also be quite encouraging for you. So we don't expect any kind of prior knowledge in that regard. Yes. Okay. By the way, the ÖMB people will also take part in some of the discussion forum sessions that we're going to have. In fact, they also already, so we have put together the syllabus partially together. And they also came up with some materials that they would like you to look at eventually. And they're also going to talk about the ÖMB lab. So what it means to run a GLAM lab, because more and more GLAM institutions have their own digitization units. For example, the Belvedere has a research center. And last year when we visited them as part of another class, I asked the director actually, like proportionally speaking, how many of the employees there use digital methods on a daily basis or regularly. And he said all of them. Now, I think this is quite indicative of how useful these skills can be one way or another. So like I said, this can be a huge advantage. So especially if you complete the whole advanced certificate, if you want to target a GLAM institution, but also if you want to remain in academia and you want to do digital humanities, this can be quite an advantage. So I've actually heard from people that sometimes they got hired because it was on their CV that they completed an advanced certificate, or they actually learned intentionally some digital humanities related stuff. Okay, you have any questions about this? Oh, yeah.
I wanted to ask for the previous one. What are the assignments for?
Come next week to class and we're going to discuss them because we don't have a lot of time, sorry. But there's going to be a couple of like different types of assignments and we're going to discuss that next week and you'll see it clearly. Yeah.
Can I enroll in this course in the winter term without enrolling in the introduction to DH in the fall semester?
You can, because the advanced certificate, so you don't have to complete the advanced certificate, so you can take the classes individually too.
Okay.
But at the same time, I think it usually makes sense to take the intro class so you have some sort of foundational knowledge about DH in a broader sense. And then this is already one of these more niche classes. So as you can see, this already has a more like a specific focus on digitization and digital additions, but we're not going to do spatial analysis or data visualization. So this is more narrow in a sense. So you can still do that. I think it should work. It's just that I think some concepts may be easier for you to understand, or maybe I'm not sure. But the UMB people, when they come, they might also use certain terms that they might assume that you understand. So obviously they are very friendly people. If you have questions, you can just ask them. They're young and friendly people, so they actually approached me that they want to be a part of this. So, and that's because they said they want to understand the users. So they want to have more connection to universities and professor students who might actually be, and they want to get a better sense of who are using their materials, who are they digitizing for. So and that's why they're actually very much interested in your input. If something is unclear, you can obviously ask them. I think they will be actually happy if they get some sort of feedback. But at the same time, I think, like I said, you can take the class separately too. I just think that it can make your life easier if you have a foundational knowledge. Anything else?
Does
Yeah.
your class covers manuscript or Middle Ages books also?
We're gonna, yeah, we have thought about like what should be the material that we're gonna use. And we have decided not to ask you to come up with a material because last year I did that in one of my other DH classes. When I wanted students to have this kind of inclusive experience that they can work on materials that's particularly relevant to them. And that's a good idea, but people can have different types of challenges. In some cases, it might be easier to process the text in a certain language than in another one. And that I don't want any student to feel like they're left behind because their text is just not working. So we just want to help you get a sense of how this process looks like and help everyone get through it. And we're going to use an English language text, and we still have to finalize which one because I have come up with like 3 different options. All of them are really cool, I think. And we're going to like collectively tell a story with it, but you're going to get like different segments of the same text. So you're going to face similar challenges at the same time. And it's going to be in English because that's the only lingua franca here. So that was actually already a challenge for the UMB people because they're Austrians and they got, one of them is German actually, but they got used to working with German materials. So this is already something that they're looking forward to, like what's going to happen in a different context. Okay. All right, now for the last section of this presentation series. So let's conclude this with the advanced certificate in digital humanities in a broader sense. Yeah, wait 10 seconds. Okay. Now everyone can sit. That's actually better. All right. So, so like I said, I'm co-director of the Advanced Certificate in Digital Humanities, which is a fairly new program here. So we launched this last September together with the Network and Data Science Department. Márton Postvai, by the way, is the professor in Network and Data Science, who's the other co-program director from their side. Now, this is intentionally a quite student-friendly advanced certificate in a sense that it doesn't require a lot of credits. So it's an 8-credit advanced certificate, which means that you can complete it with roughly 4 classes, basically. And the reason why it's been designed this way is because the idea here is to also help, for example, 1-year MA students to complete this if they so wish to. In fact, we actually have a student who completed this, who was an MA, 1-year MA student, and she is the living example that this is possible to complete. Yes.
Do you remember from which NA she was?
Historical studies 1
Okay.
year. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, she took like all of my DH classes plus 1 statistics class, which is actually not on offer this year. So that's something I'm going to talk about a little bit. Okay. So like I said, this is quite student friendly in a way that you can complete this even if you're a 1-year MA student. If you're a 2-year MA student or a PhD student, then obviously you spend more time here. So it's a little bit more relaxed for you. But at the same time, I would say something to this a little bit later. Okay. By the way, so on Time Minute in the study guide, you can check the list of advanced certificates, and that's something that already includes the list of the currently available courses, but I actually helped you out a little bit and took a screenshot of it. It's a little bit small, so I would recommend that you actually check it out on your own too afterwards. But what I would say about this in general is that, okay, as I mentioned in the case of the intro class already, so there's one mandatory class, which is the introduction to DH, the life cycle of DH projects. So this is the only mandatory 2-credit class that you need to complete. And otherwise, the rest of the credits, so the 6 credits, you can collect from the mandatory elective classes. Now, one thing I would say here is that this is the current list, and the classes are provided mostly by our department, network and data science, and to some extent by environmental studies, because there's a professor there who he does some spatial analysis, not surprisingly, so he tends to offer some GIS related class too. But there's a 1-credit class, isn't it? Yeah, it's interesting to see. Okay, so you need more of that if that's what you're interested in. But for example, the statistics class is not on the list this year. So for example, the class that this 1-year MA student took last year, that's not there. And I would say that if you see anything, regardless of how many years you spend at CEU, if you see a class on the list of mandatory electives that you find particularly interesting, I would encourage you to take it, because these classes change, or they may change. So for example, last year I taught 3 DH classes, and I only teach 1 of those this year, the intro class. But the 2 other classes that I taught last year, one of them was this co-taught class with a network and data science professor. Those are not on offer this year. So I'm doing, for example, this digitization classes that I did not teach last year. So, and the other professors are like that too. So for example, there is this class from Network and Data Science Python for Everyone. This is taught by Martin Bushway, with whom we co-taught the class last year. So I knew that he's going to teach this class this year, but he did not offer this last year. So that's what I'm saying, that regardless of how many years you spent here, if you find a class interesting and it's on the list of mandatory electives, then I would encourage you to take it, because it may or may not be available the following year. So it's up to the professor to decide. Yes. Another thing I would say about the network and data science courses, I'm not sure about who's going to teach all of them. I know some of them, but not all of them. So I would encourage you to check SITs where you can see the name of the professor. Here it's not mentioned, because I emphasize this in the case of my classes, that I don't expect you to have programming skills, but some of the network and data science courses do. So, and check with the professor who teaches that specific class. They might mention that already in the course description, that there might be some sort of prerequisites that they might require you to be well versed in Python or R, most likely Python, because these courses are mainly intended to cover the needs of network and social data science students. So, and they usually already come to see you with quite good coding skills. So, and that's why the classes are geared towards them, but they welcome humanists too. But please check that with the professor in advance to avoid surprises, just to make your life easier. So, at the same time, for example, there's another class from our department, historiography and approaches to the past. Now, this is interesting too, because this is actually not really a DH class. And these kinds of classes have been put on the list, actually mainly for social data science students, because they don't really get humanistic training. So these are actually geared mainly towards them and a little bit less towards you. I mean, I think they can benefit more from that, because you already have quite a lot of humanistic classes. But this kind of class, for example, is open to them as well. So they can also, if they do the advanced certificate, they can also get some sort of humanistic training, because otherwise they would just mostly focus on the technical part too, which is not really something that's the goal of digital humanities. So that's the interesting part of this whole situation. As for humanists, it's about, strengthening their technical skills, and for the social data science students is the other way around. So for them, learning more about the humanities is what might be something that they need more training in. So that's different from your strengths. Okay. Another thing. Yes. I actually already talked about this when I was discussing the intro to DH class. So the idea here is to cover different available subfields or areas and different tools. And like I said, the intro class is more holistic and inclusive, thematically speaking, whereas the mandatory elective class tend to be a little bit more niche, oftentimes a bit more advanced. And they are meant to actually help you get more training in specific areas that can be part of digital humanities. But at the same time, even the intro class will already help you get a sense of how computers think. So this is this overarching concept that comes up in essentially all these different classes one way or another. Okay. Yes, and I actually talked about this too, so the career options. So how I think this can be beneficial for you and how this can broaden your horizon in terms of what's available for you in the 21st century and how this can actually help you as a humanist, especially. So I'm talking to you, especially as a history student. So for you, oftentimes I see the students often worry about like what's going to happen to them and is their degree marketable and these kinds of things. Of course, very much so. So let's put this kind of worry aside so that there is no doubt about this. So actually, those with humanities degree have no more problem finding a job than those who learn something else, actually, and especially nowadays with AI, even computer scientists are becoming more and more worried about who's going to write the code, so whether they are needed. So that kind of concept that I just talked about, like what is it that you bring to the table and where your strengths are actually can very much shine in digital humanities. Those are the things that I think would be useful for you to focus on. So I think that can be a more empowering way of thinking about your role in this and what you can make of this.